During the brutal winter of 1888, thousands of lumberjacks faced temperatures of 40 below zero in the remote forests of Wisconsin, armed with nothing but axes, saws, and their own ingenuity. One mistake meant certain death in this frozen wilderness, where the nearest town was days away. Yet somehow, these men managed to create shelters that kept them alive through months of blizzards and bone-shattering cold. Here's how lumberjacks built and survived in the life-saving bunkhouses of America's northern forests. If you use these to fall asleep, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Comment where you're at and the time too. Kind of fun seeing all the different places. Someone from Iceland commented once and I had to Google what time zone that even is. Okay, tonight it's winter in a frozen logging camp. But hold on, get yourself comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. The morning alarm is the harsh clanging of a steel triangle at 4:30 a.m. You jolt awake in the dim light of the bunkhouse, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke, wet wool and unwashed bodies. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air even inside the building. The massive cast-iron stove in the centre of the room glows red hot, but the corners of the room are still cold enough to freeze water. You're huddled under 3 heavy wool blankets on your bunk, packed tightly against other men like sardines in a can. Your beard has frost in it just from your breath while sleeping. Nothing like your warm, comfortable bed right now with its clean sheets and controlled temperature. Jesus, it's cold, mutters the man next to you, his voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. The wind finds every tiny gap in the log walls, creating a constant, mournful whistle. Outside, it's still pitch black. Dawn won't break for hours, and when it does, it'll be weak and watery. This is your first winter in a logging camp, and you're beginning to wonder if it'll be your last. First winter? Asks an older man as he pulls on wool socks that are still damp from yesterday. You get used to it. Sort of. The year is 1888, and you're a lumberjack in northern Wisconsin. You arrived in the fall with about 100 other men, all drawn by the promise of steady work and decent pay. The logging companies are hungry for timber, especially the towering white pines that grow in abundance here. But to harvest them in winter, when the frozen ground makes it easier to transport massive logs, you need shelter. And not just any shelter, one that can keep 100 men alive through temperatures that would freeze spit before it hits the ground. You swing your legs over the edge of your bunk and wince as your feet touch the floor. The floor is literally frozen earth. In the more permanent camps, they might put down rough planks, but here it's just packed dirt, hard as concrete. A layer of straw provides minimal insulation. Your toes immediately start to ache with cold. The bunkhouse is a massive structure, about 30 feet wide and 70 feet long. 2 rows of bunks line the long walls stacked too high, with just enough room for a man to lie down. There's no privacy, no personal space, just wool blankets and bodies generating precious heat. Up and at 'em, ladies, the foreman's voice booms through the bunkhouse. Breakfast in 10 minutes, then we're heading out. Gonna be a cold one today. You look around and think, cold one? What exactly does he think it's been so far? Wait till it hits 50 below, says the old-timer, seemingly reading your mind. This here's practically springtime. I spent like 3 weeks researching these bunkhouses. You know what was the craziest thing I found out? The fire. Keeping that fire going was literally life or death. In the centre of the bunkhouse stands the massive cast-iron stove, the beating heart of the entire operation. It's not like your modern heater with its digital thermostat and safety features. This thing is a monster. 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet high. Right now, it's glowing red hot, stuffed with logs. The stovepipe runs the entire length of the building before exiting through the roof, acting like one long radiator. The youngest guy in camp, maybe 16, is poking at the fire, adding another massive log. This is the chore boy, and his job might be the most important one in camp. "You sleep?" you ask him. He laughs. 2 hours at a time, gotta wake up to feed the fire through the night. Let it die, and we all might not wake up. And he's not exaggerating. At 40 below zero, a few hours without that fire would be a death sentence. The chore boy has learned to read the fire like a book, knowing exactly when to add fuel and how much. Too little, and the temperature drops dangerously. Too much, and the stove overheats, creating a fire hazard that could burn the whole place down. The smell in the bunkhouse is something else entirely. Think about this. 100 men who haven't bathed in months. Wet wool socks and long johns hanging from wires above the stove, steaming and filling the air with the smell of drying fabric. The sharp tang of pine smoke, sweat and dirt and tobacco. Your nose hasn't adjusted. You're not sure it ever will. You stand up and stretch, your muscles aching from yesterday's labour. Felling trees with a crosscut saw is brutal work, especially in this cold. Your hands are calloused and cracked, and your back feels twice as old as the rest of you. You know what the secret is? The old-timer is still talking to you as he laces up his boots. Layers. Lots and lots of layers, and never ever get wet. Wet means dead out here. He's not kidding. You've already seen what happens when someone stays wet too long in this cold. Last week, a guy named Erickson got his feet wet crossing a stream. By evening, his toes were black with frostbite. They sent him south on the next supply sleigh. Word is he lost 3 toes. "Move it! Move it!" the foreman again. "Sun's not going to wait for you lazy bastards." Not that you'll see much sun today. The sky is a flat grey ceiling pregnant with snow. The blizzard that blew in last night is still raging, the wind screaming around the eaves of the bunkhouse. The logs that form the walls creak and settle with the cold. "We working in this?" you ask no one in particular. A chorus of laughter rises from the men around you. Unless you're bleeding from your eyeballs. "You're working," says a burly man with a red beard. "Company's got quotas. Trees don't cut themselves." You grab your wool cap and pull it down over your ears. Next comes your coat, made of thick wool with a collar you can pull up around your face. Your mittens are still damp from yesterday, but you have no choice but to put them on. As you do, you notice the chapped red skin of your wrists where the cold has been nibbling away at your flesh. Outside, the world is white. The snow is piled 3 feet high around the bunkhouse, with drifts reaching nearly to the roof in places. The wind whips snow into your face the moment you step outside, the tiny crystals feeling like needles against your exposed skin. The cookhouse is another log building about 50 feet away. You can see warm light spilling from its windows, and the thought of hot food is the only thing that gets your feet moving through the snow. The path between buildings has been trampled down by many boots, but the new snow is already filling it in. When you finally push open the door to the cookhouse, the warm air hits you like a physical force. Here, several massive wood-burning stoves generate enough heat to cook for 100 hungry men. The long tables are already filling up, men stomping snow from their boots and unwrapping the layers around their faces. Get it while it's hot, boys. The cook, a round man with forearms like hams, is sliding stacks of pancakes onto plates. Next to the pancakes are huge slabs of salt pork, fried until crisp. You find a space on one of the benches and sit down. A plate appears in front of you, a stack of pancakes 8 high, half a pound of salt pork and a tin cup of coffee so strong it could probably dissolve a spoon if you left it in too long. "Eat up," says the man next to you. "You'll need it." He's not wrong. Lumberjacks burn through calories like a fire through dry kindling. You've heard estimates of 6,000 calories a day, and after a few weeks here you believe it. The work is physically demanding in a way that's hard to comprehend unless you've done it. Swinging axes and pulling saws through frozen wood for 12 hours a day requires fuel, and lots of it. The pancakes are basic, just flour, water, and baking powder. But when you're this hungry, they taste like heaven. The salt pork is fatty and salty, providing the energy you'll need. The coffee is bitter but hot, and you feel it warming you from the inside. "First time seeing Cookie make pancakes?" asks a grizzled man across the table. "Watch this." He nods toward the cook, who is standing in front of a griddle the size of a door. With practiced efficiency, he's pouring batter from a massive bowl, creating perfect circles across the hot surface. In minutes, he's flipped and stacked over 100 pancakes. "Man can feed 100 hungry lumberjacks in 20 minutes flat," says your table mate with something like reverence. "Best cook in 3 counties. Company pays him more than the foreman." That's surprising, but it shouldn't be. A good cook is worth his weight in gold in a logging camp. Men will stay through the worst conditions if the food is good. A bad cook? The camp will empty out faster than you can say flapjack. You're halfway through your stack when the foreman stands up at the head table. "All right, men, here's how it's going to go today. Blizzard's still blowing, but we've got that stand of white pine northwest of camp that needs to come down. Jensen's crew will take the lead. Peterson, your boys will handle the skidding. The rest of you know your jobs." There's a collective groan around the cookhouse. Going out in a blizzard means more than discomfort. It means danger. But the company has contracts to fulfill, and the logs need to get to the river before the spring thaw. You gulp down the rest of your coffee and prepare to head out. The warmth of the cookhouse already seems like a distant memory as you pull your cap down and brace yourself for the wall of cold waiting just outside the door. "Stay close to your partner out there," warns the old-timer as you both head for the door. Man can get lost 10 feet from the trail in weather like this. They won't find you till spring thaw. That's not an exaggeration. Every year men disappear in the woods. Sometimes they're found come spring, frozen solid, perfectly preserved like grotesque statues. Sometimes they're never found at all, just became another ghost story told around the stove on winter nights. The moment you step outside, the cold slaps you across the face like a physical blow. The wind has picked up, driving snow horizontally across the clearing. The other buildings of the camp, the office, the tool shed, the stable, are barely visible through the white haze. "Grab your saw," the foreman is shouting to be heard above the wind, "and for God's sake, stay together." You and the old-timer collect your tools from the shed. The crosscut saw is 6 feet long, with teeth designed to cut in both directions. It takes 2 men to operate it, one on each end, pulling back and forth in a rhythm that, once established, can fell enormous trees with surprising efficiency. The axes are for trimming branches and cutting the logs to length. The handles are worn smooth from years of use, the heads kept razor sharp. A dull axe is not just inefficient, it's dangerous. Your crew, about 20 men, forms a ragged line and begins trudging through the snow toward the stand of pines. The going is tough, with snow up to your knees in places. Your wool pants are already wet to the thigh, and you can feel the cold creeping in. Wet means dead, the old-timer had said. But there's no staying dry in these conditions. After what feels like hours but is probably only 40 minutes, you reach the section of forest marked for cutting. The white pines tower overhead, their trunks straight and massive. Some are over 150 feet tall, with diameters of 3 feet or more. Each one will yield hundreds of board feet of lumber, enough to build several houses. This one first, the foreman points to a particularly impressive specimen. You and the old-timer position yourselves on either side of the trunk. The first task is to make the face cut, a V-shaped notch that will determine which way the tree falls. The old-timer eyes the tree, considering wind direction and the natural lean of the trunk. We want it to fall that way, he says, pointing. Away from the other trees we'll be cutting, ready? You nod, gripping your end of the saw. The old-timer is on the other side, and together you begin the rhythmic pull and push that will cut through the frozen wood. The saw bites into the bark, then the pale sapwood beneath. A fine spray of sawdust dusts the snow at your feet. The work is hard but warming. Soon, despite the brutal cold, you're sweating under your layers. This is another danger. Sweat can freeze against your skin once you stop moving, pulling away body heat just when you need it most. Steady pace, grunts the old-timer, don't rush it. It takes nearly an hour to make the proper cuts. Finally, the old-timer steps back. She's ready. Timber! The warning shout echoes through the forest. Everyone stops what they're doing and looks up, tracking the path of the falling giant. There's a moment of silence, then a series of sharp cracks as wood fibres begin to tear. The massive trunk starts to lean, slowly at first, then gathering speed. The rush of air as it falls sounds like a freight train. When it hits the ground, the impact shakes the earth beneath your feet. One down, dozens more to go, and the day has barely begun. By midday, your muscles are screaming. The cold has wormed its way into every crack in your clothing, every exposed bit of skin. Your beard is frozen solid, and your eyelashes are crusted with ice from your own breath. But the work continues. Tree after tree falls, and then comes the even harder work of trimming branches and cutting the trunks into manageable sections that can be skidded back to camp by the team of oxen. Lunch is eaten where you stand. From your pocket you pull a thick sandwich wrapped in oiled paper. The bread is homemade, dense and heavy, with a thick slab of cold roast beef in the middle. There are also a couple of molasses cookies, specially made to resist freezing even in this cold. Put it inside your coat for a few minutes, advises the old-timer, demonstrating with his own sandwich. Warms it up a bit. You follow his lead, tucking the sandwich inside your coat against your body. It's a strange sensation, but after a few minutes, when you pull it out again, at least the bread isn't frozen solid. The men eat quickly, huddled in whatever shelter they can find from the wind. There's little talk. Everyone is focused on the food and on conserving energy. Some men have brought small metal flasks filled with hot coffee or tea. A few have something stronger, though the company officially prohibits alcohol in the camps. "Half hour," calls the foreman, checking his pocket watch, then back to it. You finish your sandwich and cookies, brushing crumbs from your beard. The brief rest has allowed the cold to creep back in, and you stamp your feet to keep the blood flowing. Your toes are numb, and you wiggle them inside your boots, hoping to feel something. "First few weeks are the hardest," says the old-timer watching you. "Body adjusts, believe it or not. Mind, too." You're not sure you believe him. How does anyone adjust to this? It seems more like endurance than adaptation. But looking around at the other men, some of whom have been doing this for decades, you have to wonder, maybe there is a way to make peace with the brutal cold, the back-breaking labour, the isolation. Or maybe they're all just crazy. You haven't ruled that out yet. The afternoon passes in a blur of sawdust and sweat and numbing cold. By the time the foreman calls an end to the day, you've felled and processed over a dozen massive pines. The logs will be skidded back to camp over the next few days, then stockpiled until they can be floated downriver during the spring log drive. The walk back to camp feels twice as long as the morning journey. Every step is an effort, your legs like lead, your lungs burning from the cold air. The only thing keeping you going is the thought of the bunkhouse stove and hot food. Dusk is falling as you finally stumble back into the clearing where the camp buildings huddle against the wilderness. Smoke rises from the cookhouse chimney, and light spills from the windows of the bunkhouse. Never has such a rough place looked so much like heaven. Your first stop is the bunkhouse. You need to get out of your wet clothes before heading to supper. Inside, the stove is roaring, and the air is thick with steam from wet wool and human bodies. Men are stripping off layers, hanging socks and mittens on the lines strung above the stove. "Rough one today," comments a man already in dry clothes. He's sitting on the long bench that runs the length of the room, what they call the deacon seat. It's where men gather in the evening to talk, smoke, and repair their gear. You just nod, too tired for words. You peel off your frozen outer layers, wincing as your fingers, thawing in the heat, begin to tingle painfully. You change into your only other set of clothes, nearly identical to the ones you just took off but dry. The wet ones go up on the line where they'll hopefully dry before tomorrow. "Supper bell's about to ring," says the man on the deacon seat. "Better hurry if you want anything hot." As if on cue, the clang of the cook's triangle sounds across the camp. There's an immediate stampede for the door, men pushing and jostling good-naturedly. No one wants to miss out on the best part of the day, the evening meal. The cookhouse is a wall of heat and noise after the quiet cold of outside. Men crowd around the long tables, talking and laughing as they wait for the food. The events of the day, the trees that gave trouble, the close calls, the jokes played on the greenhorns, are recounted and embellished. Tonight's meal is a feast by logging camp standards. Roast beef, mashed potatoes swimming in gravy, baked beans, fresh bread with butter, and for dessert, apple pie. The portions are enormous. Each man gets over a pound of meat and 2 pounds of potatoes, plus all the bread and beans he can eat. You fall on the food like a starving wolf, suddenly aware of the hollow pit in your stomach. The day's work has burned through your breakfast and lunch as if they never happened. The meat is tender, the gravy rich, the potatoes creamy. The cook may not have much to work with, but he knows how to make it taste good. "Save room for pie," advises the red-bearded man sitting across from you. "Cookie's apple pie is worth saving room for." He's right. The pie, when it comes, is still warm from the oven, the crust flaky, the filling sweet and spiced with cinnamon. Each man gets an entire pie to himself, not a slice, but a whole small pie, about 6 inches across. In a world where sugar is a luxury, this is decadence. After supper, with bellies full and the worst of the day's fatigue pushed back, most men return to the bunkhouse. Some will head straight to their bunks to sleep, especially those who've drawn the early morning shifts. Others gather on the deacon's seat for what passes as social time in a logging camp. Back in the bunkhouse, the stove has been built up to a roaring blaze. The chore boy is carefully adding logs, making sure it will burn through the night. Around the stove, men are engaged in various activities. Some are playing cards, betting with matchsticks or pennies. Others are mending clothes or repairing tools. A few are writing letters home, their rough hands awkward around pencils. In one corner a man has taken out a fiddle and is tuning it. Another has a harmonica. Music is an important part of bunkhouse life, one of the few entertainments available in the isolated winter camps. You find a spot on the deacon seat and sink down with a groan. Every muscle in your body aches. Your hands are blistered despite your gloves, and your feet throb painfully as they warm up. First day's the worst, says the old-timer settling beside you. Second day's worse. After that it gets better. Sort of. The fiddler strikes up a lively tune, and the man with the harmonica joins in. Someone starts singing, a song about a lumberjack and a farmer's daughter that gets progressively more bawdy with each verse. Men laugh and join in on the chorus. For a moment, sitting here in the warmth with a full belly and music in the air, the brutal reality of the logging camp recedes. These men have created something remarkable here, a pocket of humanity in the midst of an unforgiving wilderness. The bunkhouse, rough as it is, stands between them and certain death in the frozen forest. And somehow, against all odds, they're not just surviving, they're living. Tomorrow will bring another day of brutal cold and back-breaking labour. But tonight, in the red glow of the stove, with the wind howling outside unable to reach you, there's a strange kind of contentment. You've survived your first day. Perhaps you'll make it through the winter after all. Outside, the blizzard continues to rage. Snow piles against the bunkhouse walls, and the wind screams through the trees. But inside, men laugh and sing and share stories. The stove glows red hot, and life goes on in the heart of the frozen north. Your eyes open at 4:30 a.m. again, but today you're not in your bunk. You're 3 months earlier, back in late September 1890. The morning air is crisp, but not yet brutal. You've just arrived at the site that will become the winter logging camp, part of a team of about 30 men. Most are veterans of multiple logging seasons, but there's a handful of greenhorns like you, drawn by stories of good wages and the promise of adventure in the North Woods. There's nothing here yet. Just a clearing in the vast forest of white pine and spruce, chosen for its proximity to both the timber you'll be harvesting and a small stream that will provide water through the winter months. The nearest town is almost 40 miles away, basically another world once the snows come. "Welcome to your new home, boys," says the foreman, a grizzled man named Mackenzie with a thick beard and forearms like tree trunks. "Or it will be, once we build it. That's why you're here early, weeks before the main crew arrives. Your first job isn't cutting timber for the mill, it's building the camp itself, and the most important building, the one that will determine whether you live or die once winter hits, is the bunkhouse." "We've got maybe 5 weeks before the first heavy snow," Mackenzie continues, surveying the clearing. "Need the bunkhouse up in 3, cookhouse in 4? Questions?" A lanky guy next to you raises his hand. "What if we don't finish in time?" Mackenzie just stares at him. "Then start praying, son. The urgency isn't theatrical, it's survival. You've heard stories of crews caught without proper shelter when the first blizzards hit. Those stories don't have happy endings." "All right, we start with timber selection," Mackenzie announces. "Peterson, take 5 men and mark the straightest white pines and spruces within half a mile. Johnson, your team handles felling. O'Malley, you're on skidding duty. Rest of you start clearing the building site. Move." I spent hours researching how these guys pick trees for buildings, versus trees for lumber mills. Totally different criteria. For the bunkhouse, they needed perfectly straight logs with minimal taper, basically the highest quality trees that would normally go for top dollar at the mill. But when your life depends on it, you don't skimp on materials. You're assigned to Peterson's timber selection team. He's a tall, thin man with a perpetual squint, like he's always looking into the sun. "Listen up," Peterson says once your small group is assembled. "We're looking for white pine or spruce, straight as an arrow, minimum 12 inches diameter, preferably 18. No knots if we can help it. No rot, no insect damage." "How do we check for rot?" you ask. Peterson pulls a small hammer from his belt. You knock on it. Solid wood rings. Rot sounds dull. Dead. He demonstrates on a nearby tree, and you hear the sharp, clear tone of healthy wood. Your team spreads out through the forest, examining trees with critical eyes. When you find one that meets the criteria, you mark it with a slash of red paint. By midday, you've marked about 40 suitable trees, which Peterson says should be enough for the bunkhouse walls. Meanwhile, Johnson's felling team is already at work. These men operate with an efficiency that borders on artistry. 2 men to a cross-cut saw. They make precise cuts that bring the massive trees down exactly where they want them. It's dangerous work. A tree falling the wrong way can crush a man in an instant. Back at the clearing, the ground preparation team has been busy. They've removed trees, stumps, and surface rocks from the bunkhouse site, creating a level area about 35 by 85 feet. "Bigger than I expected," you comment to an older worker as you return with Peterson. "Needs to hold 100 men through winter," he replies. "Close quarters, but better than freezing to death." You watch as the first felled trees are skidded into the clearing by teams of oxen. These enormous beasts, each weighing over a ton, strain against their harnesses as they drag logs weighing thousands of pounds through the forest. The skidding paths have been carefully chosen to avoid obstacles, but it's still brutal work for both animals and the men guiding them. "Next step is peeling and seasoning," Mackenzie announces once a good number of logs have been collected. "Show of hands. Who's worked a draw knife before?" Several hands go up, including yours. You'd worked one summer at your uncle's furniture shop where you'd learned to peel bark from smaller logs. Good. Grab a knife and get to work. I want every log peeled by sundown. Bark stays on, we get bugs and rot. Bad news in winter. The draw knives are simple tools, a blade with handles at each end that you pull toward you to strip away bark. Simple, but using one all day is exhausting work. You straddle a log and begin peeling, the blade biting into the rough bark and revealing the smooth, pale wood beneath. "Why do we bother peeling them?" asks a young greenhorn working the log next to yours. "Seems like a lot of work for a temporary building." An older worker chuckles. "Temporary? Son, this bunkhouse will stand for years, and you'll thank God we peeled these logs when you're not sharing your bunk with 1,000 insects come January. By sundown your hands are blistered despite your calluses, and every muscle in your back and shoulders screams from the repetitive motion of peeling logs. But the work is done. Dozens of massive logs lie stripped of bark, their pale surfaces already beginning to dry in the open air. "We'll let them season for a few days," Mackenzie says, surveying the day's work with satisfaction. "Shrinks them a bit, makes for a tighter fit. Meanwhile, we start on the foundation tomorrow." That night, you sleep under the stars with the rest of the crew. The September air has a bite to it, a warning of what's to come. But huddled in your wool blanket near the campfire, listening to the sounds of the forest and the low conversations of the men around you, there's a strange satisfaction. You're building something that matters, something that will keep men alive through the brutal months ahead. Morning comes too soon, announced by the cook banging on a steel triangle. He set up a temporary kitchen with a simple fire pit and some cast-iron cookware. Breakfast is a mountain of flapjacks and salt pork, washed down with strong black coffee. Nobody complains about the rough conditions. Everyone knows this is just temporary until the proper cookhouse is built. Foundation Day, Mackenzie announces once everyone is fed. Hardest damn part of the whole operation. He's not exaggerating. In the frozen north, a traditional foundation isn't an option. By winter, the ground will be frozen solid to a depth of 3 or 4 feet, making digging impossible. The solution is both ingenious and incredibly labour-intensive. We're doing mudsill construction, Mackenzie explains to the newer men. Need 20 flat stones, each about 2 feet across, 300 pounds minimum. Seeing your confused expression, an older worker named Schmidt leans over. It's like this. We place the stones on the ground around the perimeter, 8 feet apart. First course of logs sits on these stones, keeps the wood off the ground, prevents rot. Finding suitable stones means combing the surrounding forest and stream beds. When a potential foundation stone is located, it takes 4 men with wooden poles to lever it onto a skid and then have the oxen drag it back to the building site. Hang on, you say to Schmidt as you help wrestle a particularly stubborn stone onto a skid. Won't these stones shift when the ground freezes and thaws? Schmidt grins. Now you're thinking like a builder. Yes, they'll shift some. That's why we use such big ones. More stable. And the weight of the building helps keep everything in place. It's not perfect, but it works. By mid-afternoon, all 20 foundation stones have been positioned around the perimeter of the building site. Now comes the placement of the sill logs, the first and most critical course of logs that will bear the weight of the entire structure. These need to be your straightest, strongest logs, Mackenzie explains as the oxen drag the selected timbers into position. No compromise. The sill logs are massive, at least 20 inches in diameter and perfectly straight for their entire 30-foot length. Watching the men maneuver them into position on top of the foundation stones is like watching a choreographed dance, albeit one where a mistake could crush someone's leg or worse. We'll use a saddle notch for the corners, Mackenzie tells the crew as the first logs are positioned. Simple, strong, and any idiot can cut one if they're shown how. The saddle notch is exactly what it sounds like. A curved notch cut into the bottom of one log to fit snugly over the top of the log beneath it. But the simplicity of the concept belies the skill required to execute it properly. Depth of the notch needs to be about 1/4 of the log diameter, explains a carpenter named Miller as he demonstrates the technique. Too shallow, the joint's weak. Too deep, you compromise the structural integrity of the log. The notching is done with axes and adzes, tools that are lethal in inexperienced hands. You're paired with Schmidt to work on notching one corner of the bunkhouse. He's patient but exacting, showing you how to shape the notch to create a tight fit. See how I'm cutting it? Follow the curve of the log below. Make it snug. Winter wind finds any gap, no matter how small. It takes your team most of the afternoon to complete the notches for just the first course of logs. As the sun begins to set, Mackenzie inspects each corner, occasionally ordering adjustments where the fit isn't tight enough. Not bad for the first day, he concedes, which from him is high praise. Tomorrow we start building up the walls, real test of your notching skills. That night, muscles aching from the unaccustomed labour, you sit by the fire with Schmidt and a few others. The talk turns to previous winters in logging camps, and the stories make your stomach knot with anxiety. Winter of 88. Thermometer hit 50 below, says an older logger named Erickson. Found a man frozen solid just 20 yards from the bunkhouse. Got disoriented in a whiteout, wandered in circles till he fell. Didn't find him till morning. That the same winter the Johnson Creek camp lost their stovepipe, asks another man. Erickson nods grimly. Collapsed under snow weight. Filled the bunkhouse with smoke. Had to evacuate in the middle of a blizzard. Lost 8 men that night. You stare into the fire, suddenly very aware of how critical your current work is. You're not just building a shelter, you're building a fortress against death itself. That's why we don't cut corners, Schmidt says quietly, seeming to read your thoughts. That's why Mackenzie's such a hard-ass about every notch, every log. When it's 40 below and the wind's howling, you'll be damn glad we took our time now. The next few days establish a rhythm. Wake at dawn, eat a quick breakfast, then work on the bunkhouse walls until twilight, stopping only for a brief midday meal. The walls grow higher as course after course of logs is added, each requiring careful notching and fitting. As the walls rise, you develop a newfound respect for the skilled builders among you. Men like Schmidt and Miller seem to have an intuitive understanding of how logs should fit together, how to compensate for irregularities, how to create a structure that's both strong and relatively airtight. Trick is working with the logs, not against them, Schmidt explains as he helps you fit a particularly troublesome log into place. Every tree's different. Got to let the wood tell you where it wants to go. By the end of the first week, the bunkhouse walls stand nearly complete, about 8 feet high all around. Now comes one of the most crucial steps, chinking. Chinking's what keeps you alive in January, Mackenzie announces. Any gaps between logs, wind gets through, heat gets out, you freeze to death. Simple math. The chinking process is an art form in itself. First, long strips of sphagnum moss are stuffed into the gaps between logs. This moss, gathered from wet areas of the forest, has natural antiseptic properties and excellent insulating qualities. Over this, a mortar made from clay-rich soil mixed with chopped straw is applied, creating an airtight seal. In the coldest camps, they'd add a layer of pine pitch over the chinking, Schmidt tells you as you work side by side stuffing moss into gaps. Waterproof barrier. Might do that here if the winter's looking especially harsh. The chinking process takes 2 full days, with every man pitching in. It's meticulous work, ensuring that every crack and crevice is sealed against the coming cold. By the end, your fingers are raw from pushing moss into gaps, and you're covered from head to toe in clay mortar. Not pretty, but it'll keep the wind out, Mackenzie says, inspecting the completed chinking. Now for the really tricky part, the roof. The roof is the most critical part of the entire structure. It needs to support several feet of snow while keeping the interior dry. The design is a simple gable, but executing it requires both strength and precision. First comes the ridge beam, the backbone of the entire roof system. It's a massive log, almost 24 inches in diameter and running the full 80-foot length of the building. Just getting it into position requires the entire crew, plus both teams of oxen. Careful, careful, Mackenzie shouts, as the massive beam is slowly raised into position. Drop that thing, someone's getting crushed! The ridge beam is supported by a series of vertical posts called king posts, spaced every 12 feet along the length of the building. Once the ridge beam is secure, the rafters can be added. These are smaller logs, about 8 to 10 inches in diameter, that run from the ridge beam down to the top of the wall. Each rafter needs to be notched twice, Miller explains to your team. Once to fit over the ridge beam, once to fit over the top log of the wall. The notching is precise work and there's no room for error. A poorly fitted rafter could shift under snow load, potentially causing the entire roof to fail. You work with particular care, measuring twice before making any cut. Once all the rafters are in place, spaced 24 inches apart, the next step is the roof decking. This consists of rough sawn planks, typically 1 inch thick and 12 inches wide, laid perpendicular to the rafters. Where'd these come from, you ask Schmidt, noting that these are the first processed lumber you've seen in camp. Brought 'em in with us, he replies. Some things you can't improvise on site, need proper sawmill for planks. The planks are nailed in place with square-cut iron nails, creating a solid surface over the rafters. Next comes a layer of birch bark, laid as a moisture barrier. Birch bark is naturally waterproof and flexible enough to conform to the irregular surface of the planks. Used to be all they had, Schmidt comments as you help lay the birch bark. Before tar paper came along, Indians used it for canoes, you know, completely waterproof if you lay it right. Over the birch bark goes a layer of tar paper, a relatively new invention that creates a flexible, waterproof membrane. The tar paper is laid in overlapping courses, starting at the bottom edge of the roof and working upward, with each course overlapping the one below by at least 6 inches. Final touch, Mackenzie announces once the tar paper is complete. Sod layer. This surprises you. Sod? On a roof? Schmidt chuckles at your confusion. Insulation and weight. Keeps heat in. Holds the tar paper down in high winds. The sod is cut from a nearby meadow in squares about 18 inches across and 6 inches deep. These heavy pieces are passed hand to hand up to the roof, where they're carefully laid to create a smooth, even surface. The weight of the sod, about 80 pounds per square foot, helps secure everything beneath it. Some camps add cedar shingles on top of the sod, Schmidt tells you as you position another square of earth. Makes it last longer. Might do that next year if this becomes a permanent camp. By the time the roof is complete, you've been working on the bunkhouse for nearly 2 weeks. The structure is impressive, a massive rectangular building made entirely from materials harvested within a mile of the site. But there's still more to do. Floor next, Mackenzie announces. This camp's going to be here a few years, so we're doing a proper plank floor, not just dirt. This is a luxury you hadn't expected. Many temporary winter camps make do with the frozen earth as a floor, perhaps covered with straw or pine boughs. But a wooden floor will make the bunkhouse significantly more comfortable and healthier for the men who'll spend the winter here. The floor joists are laid directly on the ground, which has been carefully levelled and tamped down. Over these go rough-sawn planks similar to those used for the roof. The planks are secured with nails, creating a solid surface throughout the bunkhouse. Gaps between planks, you ask, noticing that the floorboards don't fit perfectly tight against each other. Intentional, Schmidt replies. Wood expands and contracts with temperature and humidity. Leave a little gap. Boards don't buckle when they swell. With the floor complete, attention turns to the interior. The bunks are simple wooden frames built against the long walls stacked too high. Each bunk is just big enough for one man, with minimal space between bunks to maximize capacity. Like sardines in a can, comments a worker as he helps assemble the frames, but better than freezing outside. The bunks will be filled with straw or pine boughs to create mattresses. Not exactly luxury accommodations, but in the depths of winter, they'll feel like heaven compared to the alternative. The central feature of the bunkhouse interior is the space for the stove. This isn't just a matter of clearing an area. The floor beneath the stove needs special protection, and the roof needs a carefully constructed opening for the stovepipe. Most fires in bunkhouses start at the roof opening, Mackenzie explains as a team works on the chimney hole. Need metal flashing round the pipe, good clearance. No shortcuts here. While one team works on the stove area, others are installing the few windows, small openings covered with oiled paper that will let in some light while keeping out the worst of the cold. Actual glass is too expensive and fragile for a logging camp. Won't see much through these, Schmidt says as he helps you install an oiled paper window, but they'll let in enough light to see who you're playing cards with, and that's about all you need. The door is the final major element. It's built thick and heavy, with extra reinforcement to withstand the pressure of winter winds. It opens inward, a crucial detail in a region where snow can pile up several feet overnight and potentially block an outward opening door. As the third week of construction comes to a close, Mackenzie does a final inspection of the nearly completed bunkhouse. He checks every corner, every chink, the roof, the floor, the stove opening, the windows, and the door, occasionally pointing out minor issues to be addressed. Not bad, he finally pronounces. Should keep you boys alive through winter. Probably. That probably hangs in the air, a reminder of the stakes involved. This isn't just construction, it's survival preparation. In the months to come, this building will stand between 100 men and the lethal cold of a Wisconsin winter. The final touch is the stove itself, a massive cast-iron box that arrives by wagon, along with the cook's equipment and other supplies that couldn't be manufactured on site. It takes 8 men to unload it from the wagon and position it in the centre of the bunkhouse. "Beautiful, isn't she?" says the cook, patting the stove's black iron surface affectionately. "This lady'll keep you warm in January when it's cold enough to freeze your piss before it hits the ground." The stovepipe is assembled and run the length of the building before exiting through the carefully prepared roof opening. The long run of pipe will extract maximum heat from the exhaust gases before they escape outside, an essential efficiency in the depths of winter. That night, as a celebration of sorts, the cook prepares a special meal, and the first fire is lit in the bunkhouse stove. As the men gather in the nearly completed building, there's a palpable sense of accomplishment. What was an empty clearing 3 weeks ago is now a structure capable of housing 100 men through the most brutal conditions nature can deliver. "Built to last, this one," Schmidt says with satisfaction, running his hand along a perfectly notched corner. "Might still be standing 20 years from now." You look around the bunkhouse, mentally cataloguing all the work that went into it. The carefully selected logs, the precisely cut notches, the meticulously applied chinking, the strategically designed roof. Every element represents knowledge passed down through generations of men who learned, sometimes through deadly trial and error, how to survive in this unforgiving environment. Main logging crew arrives next week, Mackenzie announces over dinner. Still need to finish the cookhouse, office and tool shed, but the hard part's done. As you sit by the new stove, feeling its first tentative heat begin to fill the bunkhouse, you realize something. You've helped create more than just a building. You've helped forge a bulwark against the wilderness, a place where men can endure the coming months of darkness and cold. Outside, the September air carries a sharper chill now, and the leaves have begun to turn. Winter is coming, but now you're ready for it. You wake up shivering. The bunkhouse is complete now, and the main crew has arrived, filling the long building with nearly 100 men. October has given way to November, and the first serious cold snap has hit. Last night, the temperature dropped to 15 below zero. Just a taste of what's to come, according to the veterans. The problem? Your bunk is along the north wall, one of the spots furthest from the central stove. While the middle of the bunkhouse stays reasonably warm, the corners can be frigid. Last night, a cup of water you left by your bunk froze solid. "Trade you bunks," says a large Finnish lumberjack named Isaacson when he sees you shivering. "I run hot anyway. Too close to that damn stove and I can't sleep." You're surprised by the offer but grateful. "You sure?" He nods. "Been doing this 15 years. Know how to stay warm anywhere. You're new. Take the warmer spot while you figure things out." This is your first lesson in bunkhouse survival. The community takes care of its own. Veterans look out for greenhorns, teaching them the countless small skills needed to stay alive through the winter months. It's not charity, it's practical. A man who freezes to death or loses fingers to frostbite can't work, and in a logging camp everyone needs to pull their weight. Moving your meagre belongings to the new bunk closer to the stove takes all of 2 minutes. You don't own much. Some extra clothes, a few personal items, a small photo of your family. The logging company provides the tools of the trade. "Smart move, letting Isaacson take that corner," comments Schmidt as he laces up his boots for the day. "Fins are built for the cold. Pretty sure they're part polar bear." Isaacson, overhearing, just laughs. "We're born in the cold, die in the cold, might as well get comfortable with it." The real expert on cold survival, though, turns out to be the chore boy, 16-year-old Danny, whose job is maintaining the bunkhouse stove around the clock. You watch him one morning as he tends the fire with practiced precision. I talked to this historian who spent his career studying these camps, and he told me that in many ways the chore boy was the most important person in camp. If he fell asleep at the wrong time or didn't know exactly how to manage that fire, people died. Crazy responsibility for usually the youngest guy there. "See, it's not just about keeping it hot," Danny explains when he notices your interest. "Too hot and the stovepipe could ignite creosote buildup. Whole place goes up. Too cold and men freeze. Gotta find the balance." Danny's expertise extends beyond simply adding wood. He knows exactly which logs to choose based on the temperature outside and the time of day. Large maple logs for the coldest nights, smaller pieces for more precise control during the day. He can read the colour of the flames and the coals to judge the fire's health. "Most important thing I do is banking the fire at night," he tells you, demonstrating as he speaks. "Rake the coals to the back, cover 'em with fine ash. Acts like a blanket, lets 'em smoulder slow without flaming up. Come morning, just rake away the ash, add kindling, blow on the coals, and boom, fire's back." Using this technique, Danny has kept the bunkhouse fire alive continuously for weeks. This is crucial, as starting a new fire in the depths of winter with everything frozen solid would be challenging at best. "How do you sleep?" you ask him. "If you're tending the fire all night?" 2 hours at a time, he says with a shrug. "Set this little alarm clock in my head. Wake up, tend the fire, go back to sleep. You get used to it." You're not sure you could ever get used to that kind of fractured sleep, but Danny seems to take it in stride. At 16, he's already a seasoned veteran of winter survival. Later that day, an older logger named Gustafson gives you another critical lesson in cold survival, one focused on your clothing. "Layers," he says simply, watching you prepare to head out for the day's work. "Not enough layers there, son." You look down at yourself, confused. You're already wearing a wool shirt, a wool vest, and a heavy coat. "Seems like plenty to me." Gustafson shakes his head. "Watch what the veterans do." And so you do. You observe as the experienced loggers dress for the day, and you're amazed at the systematic approach they take. First comes a thin cotton undershirt. Keeps the wool off your skin, one explains. Then a heavy wool shirt, followed by a wool vest. Some men add a second wool shirt before putting on their mackinaw coat. Pants are similarly layered, long underwear, then heavy wool trousers. Cotton kills, Gustafson tells you bluntly. Gets wet, stays wet, pulls heat from your body. Only use it as that first layer. Everything else is wool. Wool keeps you warm even when wet. Hands and feet get special